I'm Dee Dee Strum. Welcome to Trailblazers Impact Podcast with inspiring stories of women who created new paths for other women to follow. Our website is trailblazersimpact.com, and you can contact us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. Mildred, I want to thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with Trailblazers Impact, a program by, for, and about women of achievement. You have a stellar history that goes back, well, I'll certainly let you tell your story, but you recounted to me how you started college back in the early 50s. And so I look at the wealth of experiences that you've had over these years, and I want to start by saying I've summarized them in terms of your career start in the early 60s in physical ed and instructor, dance instructor. You've always had a role in being an advocate for girls and women. You became a state athletic commissioner after Title IX was passed, which I certainly want you to share with the listening audience, that experience of helping to be a pioneer for girls in sports. You've been in retirement, spawned a whole new career that I am anxious to hear about and have you share becoming a star of TV ads as a grandmother. That's a really interesting part of your history. Your art collection, you've been an art collector of true African artifacts since 1960, and you've helped start a nonprofit that grew out of one of your ventures from your early career days. So much ground to cover, but I want to start by asking, what do you think were the childhood influences that built your trajectory to 60 plus years of activism on behalf of women and girls?
Well, thank you, first of all, for involving me in this wonderful program that you all are creating for women across the country. I think it's a great thing that you've done, and that you are sharing the history of now with the young women in the future. And they'll be looking for all of us old pioneers, and certainly this will be a good place for them to listen and hear what's going on, and soon, I'm sure, to read about us. My life early on, I grew up with I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. And my mother and father, my mother passed away in 1940, at which time I was 4, about to enter kindergarten. And the oldest sibling was 12, and the youngest one was 12 hours old. And so my father had to turn into a Superman, which he did do, and he raised all of us, and he promised my mother that he would keep us together, and he did do that. My mother attended Arkansas A&M for 3 years in Pine Bluff. My father came to Gary when he was 17 to work in the Gary Steel Mills, and he had pretty much worked on the farm with my grandfather, and his education did not extend beyond the 3rd grade. I wish I could say to you how the two of them got together, but I really don't know. But they did, and I'm happy that they did. There's such a difference in the quality of education that they had. But he was a smart man, and that came out anyway, regardless of the schooling that he had. As I said, I grew up with 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and I was number 5, right in the middle of 3 boys who were within 4 years of me either way. So they were my playmates. And as growing up, until they got older and didn't want to play with me anymore. But I learned to run and jump and spit and cuss like any young boy. I was a wild tomboy, and I loved sports and athletics, and as I grew into being a young woman, I toned that down and stopped acting like a boy and started acting like a girl that I was. I played every sport in high school because I had been playing all kinds of sports with my brothers, and in the neighborhood. This was way before television, because I was born in 1935. Kids then just played in front of the house and in the street, and there were so few cars you could play games like kick the can. I don't know if you know that, or we had our form of what was this game with the sticks and the 3 cans? I can't even think of the name of it now, but anyway, it was kind of like baseball. And we played that in the street, and every now and then you'd have to stop and let one car go by. But for the most part, all the kids in the neighborhood played drop hands and run, which is just a line where you stand and you see who could win. When the leader said drop hands, run, and whoever got to the line first was it. And we loved all those kind of games. So I had all of the kind of skills that you need to be athletic. In addition to that, we all attended the same high school, or the same school, from kindergarten through the 12th grade, which was Gary Roosevelt High School in Indiana. And it was an all-black school. I know you've heard of Crispus Attucks. And so in Indiana at that time, there were 3 all-black schools, high schools, no 4. One in South Bend, one in Indianapolis, one in Gary, and one in Evansville. And we played each other often because no one would compete athletically with those teams up until about 1955, which was kind of sad when you think about it. But I'll get to that a little bit later on. So in high school, I joined the GAA, which is a Girls Athletic Association, which was an intramural activity, because they did not have interscholastic sports for girls when I was in high school. And those of us who had these longings to compete had to settle for intramural activities, which means that you only played within your own school. You played members of other classes or within your class after school in organized programs. And the GAA was a national organization for girls. And they also had the WAA, which was what some of the college women participated in, because they too could not participate in inter-school athletics. Inter-school athletics was not approved for girls in our country until 1972 with the passage of Title IX. And I guess I could call myself a Title IX baby, because even though I was a grown woman when it surfaced, it affected my life very deeply. In 1972, Senator Birch Bayh from Indiana and Congresswoman Patsy Mink from Hawaii wrote the legislation for Title IX that changed the lives of women all across the United States, of all ages. Would you like for me to read that to you, the law that was passed?
Please.
No person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So that affected all of the high schools and all of the colleges across the country. In Indiana, the Indiana High School Athletic Association was the governing body for sports in Indiana, and each state has a state association just like that. So there are 50 state associations in the United States that belong to the National Federation of State High School Associations, which writes the playing rules and the constitutive rules for the 16 to 18,000 high schools in the country. That organization started in 1920. The Indiana High School Athletic Association began in 1903, which means that high school boys in Indiana had been competing in sports for well over 100 years before they even looked at thinking about the girls' play. They always told us that we were too weak to play these vigorous sports, and some of them that we did play were watered down so that we wouldn't get too tired playing. They just didn't know us women and us girls. But anyway, moving along, when I was in high school, we had an excellent program, and I so admired my teacher, who was the sponsor of it for us. Her name was Catherine Cook, and she had a degree in physical education from the University of Wisconsin. And early on in my life, I had decided that I would be a teacher of physical education. I loved this woman. I tried to walk the way that she walked and hold my head up the way that she did. And so I was constantly involved all year round in whatever sport was in season. As a freshman, I earned letters that were given only to juniors, participation letters, because I had participated in everything and had earned enough points as a freshman to get a school letter, a big gold R for Roosevelt, and I received that at our banquet at the end of the year. I was also a high school cheerleader, and I did that because I wanted to see all of the athletic events at school, which cost money to see, and my brothers were pretty athletic, and they starred in many activities in the high school. So I was always there supporting them and supporting the school. So I was a cheerleader for 2 years in high school. My junior year I went in. My junior year also, I became the vice president of the Girls Athletic Association. And in my senior year, of course, I became the president of the Girls Athletic Association, and because that was all part of what my life was all about. I played every sport: basketball, soccer, but we called it, what did we call it then? It wasn't soccer. It'll come to me in a minute. Volleyball, track and field. I don't want to brag, but I was pretty good. When I was in the 8th grade, I participated in a junior high all-city group track meet, and I did the long jump, and I jumped when I was 13, 17 feet with no training, and the world's record for women was 20. And I often thought that if I had had the opportunity to go on with track and field, that I might have made it to the Olympics. But that was just a thing, you know. And I didn't know a whole lot about the Olympics then anyway, and it really didn't mean that much to me that I had done that, because, you know, jumped to 17 feet, because there was nothing more for me after the 8th grade. And we didn't do the track and field in high school. That was the one sport we did not do. But we played everything else, and it was fun and great.
And while I can appreciate you not wanting, as you said, not to sound like you're bragging, I can certainly brag on you, because now I have a question. It helps me, it gives me background and context for the induction, the honor that you received. Well, I guess it's probably been 20 years ago now. You were inducted into the Women's Sports Hall of Fame.
No, it was the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame.
Oh, Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame.
I was the first woman inducted into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. And that was because of my position as assistant commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association. I was not inducted as a player or a coach.
Okay.
But because of the history of women in sports, and men, and for men too, there is one award that is given every year to a person who is not a coach or a basketball player. And so that's to recognize their contributions. When I was at the IHSAA, I was in charge of all of the officials that were licensed to work in Indiana. And we had 8,000 officials licensed in 9 sports. And it was my job to register them and test them, provide clinics, training clinics for them throughout the state, and to work with directly with the 25 officials associations. And in some sports to help select officials for tournament series.
Okay. So Title IX was passed in 1972. You became a athletic commissioner for the state of Indiana in 1977.
In 1977,
yes. And I know it took several years, of course, for the legislation itself to sort of be operationalized. And I think I recall the history that you were one of the first 2 women hired as an athletic commissioner for the state of Indiana?
Yes, I was actually the 3rd woman.
Oh, the 3rd one.
The first thing they did was to hire 1 woman, and I think she came in 1973 to help set up the program.
Okay.
She had been the president, the executive director of the Girls GAA statewide in high school, and that group had petitioned the IHSAA as soon as they heard about Title IX to get a woman on the staff. And so her name was Patricia Roy, and so she was there for 5 years before I came. I had met her along the way because the GAA in 1961, the state GAA, had asked me to do a clinic for them in modern dance, because modern dance was also a specialty of mine. And when I was at Indiana University, I took a lot of dance classes and ended up teaching at IU because one of the professors became pregnant in my senior year, and I was able to get a little money on the side from that one talent. And that was one of the talents that I had used during the 17 years of my teaching career. I taught physical education, health, and dance at Washington High School in East Chicago, Indiana, which is about 15 miles from my home in Gary.
But that you weren't the first woman, but you were then the first African American woman.
I was the first and the second African American woman in the country to be hired by a state association to work in the help with the girls program, because at that time we were creating programs. When I went to the IHSAA, they had sponsored only sports in 3 sports for girls: gymnastics, track and field, and I think volleyball. And each year we would add a different sport. So until we ended up with the 9 sports that the IHSAA certifies or regulates throughout the state.
Well, having now heard your background as an athlete, your teaching experience as a senior at Indiana University, and then the 17 years you spent with the local educational system, I can understand why you came to the attention of the Indiana High School Athletic Association. But I'm curious, how was it that you were approached? How was it that you became the candidate for that position?
Well, to be very honest with you, the supervisor of physical education for the East Chicago Public Schools came to me one day with an application. And he said, "Mildred, this is an application to become assistant commissioner for girls sports for the Indiana High School Athletic Association." He said, "I heard you were thinking of leaving." And I said, "Yes, my husband and I are thinking of moving we wanted to try a different experience because we both grew up in Indiana and went to schools in Indiana, and and he's about to retire from his position, so we thought we'd try somewhere else." And so he said, "Well, I think you ought to try this one. I think you can get this one." And I looked at it and read it, and cocky me, I said, "Yeah, I think I can get it too." And then after I said that, I thought, oh, that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but as it turned out, I did. Our high school's basketball team was in the 1960 state championship. And at that time, I was assigned to do my student teaching at East Chicago, Washington High School. So I had watched them during the tournament series, playing and winning. So when I went to the school, I was able to participate in all of the celebration for what they In Indiana, when you win the state basketball tournament, you are somebody that year, you know, and for the history thereafter. And so it was fun to be a part of that.
A quote that I see often that said, "She thought she could, and so she did."
Yes.
And when you said you received that application, read it, and said, "Okay, I think so too," and so she did. You became a member of the Indiana Athletic Commission. Ultimately, then you and your husband moved from northern Indiana to Indianapolis,
Correct.
where association is housed. That's what I had the privilege of meeting you and coming to know you as a advocate, a very passionate, strong advocate for women and girls. And again, now I understand why, what the backstory was that brought you to that point. And when here in Indianapolis, you became such a civic leader. So I want to segue to the other accomplishments that you've had as an advocate and as a civic leader in the state's capital.
Before I talk more about my time at the IHSAA and my activity here within the community of Indianapolis, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about how I got here. So we had come down, our family. At that time, my daughter was 10 and my son was 14, and my husband and we had come to see the state track meet because I knew that I would be involved in this. When we arrived, we saw the supervisor of physical education for the city of Gary and his assistant. They were sitting, and we both knew them because they were both teachers at the high school that I had attended at one point. My husband knew them well too. Sat with them, and we all had a nice time. And on our way out across the heading towards our cars, Coach Smith, who was the supervisor, said to me, "You know, we're going to put in a class action suit against the Indiana High School Athletic Association." And I said, "Really? Why would you do that?" He said, "Well, Don here applied for a position as assistant commissioner for the Indiana High School Athletic Association, and they didn't even grant him an interview. Never had a black person on their staff." And I said, "Well, let me say this to you. Please don't do that, because they just hired me." And of course, these two men, their jaws about hit the ground when I said that. When the realization came through to them, they found, "Well, congratulations, we're happy for you." I later found out that there were 54 applicants for that job, 8 women, and the others were all men, mostly high school principals and athletic directors, because the IHSAA in all the states across the country is a principals organization. The principals make up the executive board, and they make the decisions, etc., and they do the hiring. So many of the membership, several of the principals had applied for that position. There were only 5 commissioners in the state, so that's a little bit different from being principals, and you're a step away from the kids, but you're still working for the kids. And in Indiana, there were 100,000 boys that participated in athletics and 60,000 girls when I left in 1997. 2 funny things kind of happened to me after the announcement was made. And after I took the job, a woman called and asked to see me, and she told me she was head of the department at a local university, head of the physical education department, and she couldn't understand why they would hire me over her. And so she came, she said, "I wanted to see you face to face." And I thought, she told me all that sitting in front of me, and I'm sitting there looking at her, and she had more education than I did and all of that. So I smiled at her and I said, "Well, I'm sorry that you are unhappy about that, but I did get the job, and I will do the best that I can." We got to be friends later on, but she was not real happy with that. And there were others who were not.
Of course, the grandeur of being the first African-American woman on the state high school athletic commission, and the second in the country, second African-American woman in the country, to how you became so involved in the community. Your name became, I think, much bigger in the context of your giving back spirit, as opposed to people saying, "Well, you know, she's an athletic commissioner." I don't even know if many of them knew what you did.
Yeah, that may very well be. After I had been here 2 years and had gotten myself acclimated, me like a postgraduate course, there was nowhere that you could get the training for that job. But after I had been in town for a couple of years, I realized that all I was doing was going back and forth to work. And of course, now I shouldn't say all I was doing, because that job involved traveling all over the state and going in and out of the 425 high schools that we had, and the IHSAA put on 1,200 tournaments a year. So I was pretty busy with my job and my children and my husband, etc. So I was finally settled, and I met a woman one day by the name of Ann Gray. And her husband had been a friend of mine at Indiana University. He was a big-time football player. And she said, "Why don't you come and go to this meeting with me? There's a group of us women who are trying to put together a chapter for the Coalition of 100 Black Women, the National Coalition of 100 Black Women." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that would be interesting." So I went to the meeting, and there must have been, I guess, 40 or 50 women in that meeting that day, and I listened, and everything was so exciting and promising. And then several of us began to ask questions, and so I raised my hand, and I just stood up and said that how happy I was to see so many Black women, because for the last 2 years I had been talking mostly to white women, and I was missing, being around some of my sisters. So I became very much involved in the coalition, as did some 93 Black women at one point in Indianapolis. And there were others across the country. I don't know how many chapters there are now. 100 Black Women has become a wonderful organization for women to work together to advance their own causes. I got involved with the local chapter, and that helped me to find my way around the community. They're with them, championing activities for young girls, mentoring programs to help young Black women follow in the footsteps of many of the women in that group, because all of them were successful in one way or another.
You became the second president of this
correct.
chapter. You were the vice president when the organization was chartered here.
Yes.
And then you went on to become the chapter president.
Right.
And pushing out our mentoring agenda for girls. And can you just name a couple of the other organizations that you became involved with, and the kinds of leadership roles and programs you helped them push out?
Well, I also became involved in the Indianapolis chapter of the Lynx.
Okay.
And that too is a national organization. In both of those groups, I encouraged them to start mentoring programs for high school girls. Both of them did that, and successfully. That was my one main interest, to see that our young women were being mentored by quality women.
She thought she could, and so she did.
Right.
Again, I keep thinking of that bumper sticker because you did make so many things happen for the benefit of girls. I want to now jump forward to your retirement years. You retired how many years now?
22 years.
22 years.
22 years.
And your 22 years of, quote, retirement really became more of a friend from Gary, Dr. Diane Jackson Chapman once said to me, she said, "I didn't retire, Dee Dee." She said, "To do nothing, I retired in order to refire." Well, you are a woman who I can truly say retired in order to refire. And the thing I have been most mesmerized by is your role, as you say, now 84 grandmother, and you are the star of so many local and regional TV commercials. Can you share with the women how you have become known in this area by commercials, and how many commercials you've done, and at what age you signed up with the acting agency, the Helen Wells Agency, I believe?
The Helen Wells Agency.
Right. Can you give us a little bit about what age were you when you did that?
I was 80 when I signed up for that. It all happened sort of as a fluke. A girlfriend of mine that I attended college with called me up one day and asked me if I would go to the Children's Museum in Indianapolis to be a black grandmother in a commercial that they were putting together because they had this exhibit, The Terracotta Soldiers. And she is a writer and has written over 17 publications. She said, I'm writing now, and it's coming out of every pore, and I'm not stopping. She said, so please go for me. So I said, okay, and I did, because I certainly qualified as a black grandmother and enjoyed the commercial. At the end of the day, they gave me some money, and I said, oh, how can I do this again? And they told me about the Helen Wells Agency, and I called them and asked if I could come and apply. The director asked me on the phone if I was an actress, and I said, isn't everybody? And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, no one ever really introduces their real self to you. And she thought about it, and then she said, you're right. I said, yeah, you only get what people want you to see. So anyway, I went out and interviewed for them, and as a result of that, I have done 13 commercials. It's been fun. I never thought I would get into this, but I found out later after I auditioned and they recorded me on video that they profile you. So if they need a black grandmother, I'm one of several women that they will call, and they may have 10 women that they will call to interview for a position. And in the end, the client decides who gets the job. So I've been fortunate, and it's fun. I don't like them when they have a whole lot of words in them, but it's been a good thing for me. For the second commercial that I did was for the Goodwill industry. It's kind of funny because I've always been a flea market person, and I used to, when I taught dance and had a performing dance group and we needed costumes, I would often go to the Goodwill to see what we could make out of some of the things that they had, because at the high school level we didn't have a budget. We only had the money that we earned from our concerts and our performances. But so anyway, the Goodwill commercial, I made that. It was fun, and as a result, it had to do with heavy lifting, picking up furniture and stuff. And there's a commercial of me trying to get a big chest into the back end of a small car. As a result, the whole idea behind it is that the Goodwill is trying to get people to come and get their heavy furniture. And so they said throughout the commercial, you know, if you can't pick it up, we'll come and get it. Playing that for 4 years now, and they've played it almost every day. And everywhere I go in the city, somebody recognizes me from that commercial and will come and ask me if I'm the woman in the commercial, and I say yes, and then we go off into all kinds of conversations. So I've had fun with that one. At one point, I kept asking myself, because people would say, oh, I love that commercial, it's so good, it's particularly black people. And then I said, now why is it that black people always say that? And then it dawned on me that here was this black woman standing in a driveway in front of a mansion with a 3-car garage, giving away something instead of asking for something. And so that was a subtle message from that commercial. So I figured that's why they're stopping. I've enjoyed that, and I've done several commercials for nursing homes and some hospitals, and I've met a lot of people, all denominations and races, who would stop me. And a friend of mine called me from Chicago and said, did I see you on TV with a bunch of little kids walking through the museum? And I said, you most certainly did. It's been kind of a career. It isn't something that I could live off of because we're a non-union market. And people come from, in fact, there was a company that came out of Boston, and I did a commercial for them. And then they went back to Boston because they pay you one time and they don't have to pay residuals. And of course, that's one of the things that people ask me when they stop me in the store or anywhere. How much money do you get every time they play that? Because they play it every day. And I tell them sadly, I said, got paid once. But I'm not unhappy about it because it was more money than I had before I made it.
I know that there is one that you're particularly proud of as what I call one of your legacy projects. And you shared with me this beautiful brochure about Top 20 Inc.
And I taught dance at Indiana University. That was the top 20.
And that was in 1961. Oh, in 1961.
There were 3 women in the girls' physical education department at the school. And one day, the band director ended up in our office, and he was just fuming. He said, "I need your help down here." He says, "They're sending me these kids in the 9th grade from the elementary schools that have been taking music, and they don't know how to play. They're not teaching them right." He said, "So I have to take time to teach them how to play, and I don't have time to teach them how to march." Together a group of girls that I can put out in front of the band, and the people will watch the girls and listen to the band. And that's how it all started. So I was the only one there qualified to teach any kind of dance. So I ended up having auditions. We put the word out around the school, and 20 young women showed up. And that's how we got the name Top 20. So they named themselves the Top 20. The school had a spot in the curriculum for dance to be taught. We were the first group of its kind in the state to perform at halftime during basketball and football games, athletic events, and then we were invited to dance in other places. We raised money with our concerts, and in 1975, we took 45 girls, the 35 girls that I had in Top 20 at the time, plus the 10 cheerleaders that we had, and 10 chaperones. So there were 55 of us, and we toured 3 states in Mexico. 1/3 of the student body was white, and I guess you could say European descent, because there were a lot of immigrants in East Chicago, Indiana. Another third was Puerto Rican and Mexican, and then the other third was black. And I thought it would be a great experience for all of them.
Started in 1961. In the year 2011, that program was 50 years old.
That's
so there
correct.
had been continuity for 20 years.
Yes.
And then you shared that in 2012, which was the 50th year of existence, the organization had survived for 50 years promoting girls.
Right.
And they became incorporated as a nonprofit.
That's right.
And that's when you became the Top 20 Inc. And I see here that the tagline for Top 20 Inc. is putting positive choices in motion. Our mission is to enable teenage girls to make positive life choices. And it shows a beautiful picture of you as the Top 20 founder, the founder of the Top 20. And I'd like to close by asking you if you would read just the section on the commitments and responsibilities that the nonprofit, the Top 20 Inc. asks of the girls and their parents.
Commitments and responsibilities. The parents or guardians are responsible for ensuring the girls promptly arrive to the program site each session. The girls must commit to participate in the physical activities, strive to seek academic excellence, respect others and their opinions, and demonstrate good behavior and citizenship. This program now has over 200 kids, but they're in after-school programs now because, and we still teach dance, but we also do other things and mentor and involve them in community service and things of that nature.
And I know that you shared that your role now is that of a board member, and
Yes.
that you do still attend board meetings. So again, 20-some years after your official retirement, you have taken on another career, so to speak, making TV commercials, continue your role as a civic leader, not just in Indianapolis, but still across the state with your participation and the nonprofit that has now been founded in the northern part of the state. So I want to thank you on behalf of Nan McKay and myself, Trailblazers Impact, for sharing this story, because you are truly a trailblazer, one of the women that I looked up to and admired at the age of 28 when I joined with the other women in starting the coalition chapter here. You are always beautiful, always so gracious, willing to talk with the younger members and to encourage us to go on to live our best life. And I think it is because of women like you and Faye Williams that many of us have gone on to live our best life. So I thank you on a personal level as well as a professional level. I hope you've enjoyed listening to another story of the impact of Trailblazers. Visit our website at trailblazersimpact.com and connect with us at hello@trailblazersimpact.com. Remember, you must learn a new way to think before you can master a new way to be.